Thank you. Okay, instructions on exiting the building in case of emergency and review of technology options. And we actually have 3 people in the audience, so this has some importune.
So good evening for those in the audience. If there's an emergency, you can go out either back door at the back of the room and either left or right out the main doors. For those who are participating remotely, it would be super helpful if somebody could chat me and make sure you all can hear us. But assuming you can, we are monitoring the chat for questions and folks who would like to have their comments heard, but we are not monitoring the chat for content. So if you want to make a content comment, please indicate so in the chat and we will call on you. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
And they have audio. Fantastic.
good.
Thank you.
All right, item 3, agenda review. Are there any additions, deletions, or changes in the order of agenda items tonight? No. Hearing none, or seeing none, we'll move on to item 4, comments and questions from the public not related to the agenda. Please come up to the mic. If you wish to take your mask off to speak, you certainly may. And there should be a green light.
There's a green light on.
Good, okay, thank you.
And I'm assuming that public comment time is the right time to talk about higher ground, Burton?
Yes.
Given that you're going into executive session?
Correct, that would be fine.
Great, and I wrote something because it's easier.
That's fine, no.
Yeah.
So please tell us your name and where you live.
My name is Wendy Bratt, and I live in South Burlington Fire District Number 1, better known as Queen City Park, or QCP. And I'm speaking on behalf, I think, of many and probably most of my neighbors. So 2 summers ago, I met with Tom Chittenden and Megan on the QCB Green to talk about higher ground, joining hands with Burton to build a 1,500-seat concert venue practically in our side yard and across the street from Red Rocks Park. As you know, that possibility is now closer to becoming reality, and we appreciated your support through the Act 250 hearing, and now ask for your help in appealing to the environmental court. We need help to protect the quality of life of 88 South Burlington households along the South Burlington roads and the higher ground traffic areas, and also our collective gem, which is Red Rocks City Park. We hope City Council will commit to a relatively speaking, small sum of money and effort and time into this appeal and last push to protect South Burlington streets from being flooded with concert goers by putting guidelines into place, and to protect our city park from tailgaters who get turned away pre-show from the higher ground parking lot. And I believe many of you know many of the issues we are facing, but we invite you to talk to those of us who are directly impacted by this potentially. This is not a plea to shut down higher ground, but rather to have them open their doors with the quality of life and safety of their neighbors at the forefront, as they say they want to do. As much as I too want to grow business in Vermont, I would like to know business is growing with the utmost care for the surrounding residents, for road safety, and for the care of our park. I want to make the strong point that I really think South Burlington can be pro-business and at the same time still protect its constituents. It's not an either-or situation. And so my question to you is, will City Council participate in this appeal going forward? And I'd really like to thank you for having the conversation tonight. I am a member of our fire district's prudential committee, and my neighbors ask repeatedly about if you guys are going to support us, and they're expecting it. They really are. It's sort of assumed that you will support us. I can't imagine there's anyone from QCP who doesn't hope for some concessions from Burlington and Burton to protect our neighborhood nighttime noise levels, the traffic safety on QCP's single ingress and egress, along with the one-lane bridge. There was another accident on it last weekend. Traffic safety entering and exiting Route 7, pedestrian safety, police presence parking on QCP's very narrow streets, and on, you know, even unanticipated related challenges. So again, I ask you to support us by appealing to the environmental court. We are a small group of your South Burlington citizens, relatively speaking, but we really need your help right now. And I thank you very much for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you very much, Wendy. Are either of your companions, why don't you please come up?
No, I wasn't going to speak, but.
Okay. Okay, I assume so. All right, so we have Lori Smith, who's on the meeting, the Zoom meeting. So Lori, why don't you speak now? Hi,
Can you hear me?
we can.
Super. So I'm going to read a statement too, just to try and be succinct. And I want to say good evening, councilors. I want to thank you all for your service and for all that you've done to date to try and ensure that the redevelopment of the Burton campus is done in a way that does not negatively impact Queen City Park and the surrounding neighborhoods. I'd like to bring to your attention one aspect of the higher grounds proposed relocation that I don't believe has been discussed. South Burlington will be losing significant tax revenues if higher ground moves to Burton's campus in Burlington. Those revenues have helped offset the cost of over 100 annual police responses to the current higher ground venue. The new venue will have at least 50% larger capacity than the current facility, which will surely require a proportionately larger response from law enforcement. Given that the new location is directly on the South Burlington town line, our police force will undoubtedly still be involved in calls. And with the new location at the most remote location to the current police department, the financial burden on our town will likely still be significant. I also want to mention that there may be alternative ways to support the ongoing efforts if the city chooses not to file its own appeal of the recently granted Act 250 permit. Attorney Jim Dumont requested that the city provide funds to help pay for expert witnesses for the citizen-led effort in the Act 250 hearings. Those needs are going to be even greater in the environmental court. Providing funds to support these ongoing efforts will help your citizens in the effort to protect not only Queen City Park, but also our beloved Red Rocks Park. Any way that we can work collaboratively and pool our resources to maximize our efforts will greatly increase our chances of ensuring that the redevelopment of the Burton campus is done in a way that respects the quality of life of its neighbors. And I really want to thank you all for your consideration.
Thank you, Lori. We have Doug Goodman from also online. Welcome, Doug.
Thank you. I just want to, mirror Lori and Wendy's feelings.
Doug, your voice got really low all of a sudden.
Did it start? How am I now?
You sound fine now.
Okay, that's weird. Anyway, I just wanted to thank you for the opportunity to say a few words and basically just say that I am in agreement with what Lori and Wendy have said, and they really have covered my thoughts and the thoughts of many other people in the neighborhood. We appreciate the efforts that South Burlington has made over the last year or so, and the attendance the attendance of the consul and attorney at the meeting, the walkthrough on the Burton campus in March of last year. And your ongoing support is really important to us. So thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak?
I do. Hello?
Linda Norris. Hi, Linda.
Well, there's
Oh.
Iris and Linda.
Oh, okay.
Somebody
Yeah.
for me. Go ahead.
I'm getting a very heavy echo of the person who spoke before me, but I just want to say that I concur with both Doug and Wendy's statements. My big concern is not what they put at Burton at all. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so I don't care what they put on that campus. The echo's coming through. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. You don't sound echoey to us.
Okay, so I'll talk over my own echo.
Okay.
In any case, My concern is essentially the safety of the people in my neighborhood in Queen City Park, as well as the people who are going to be attending these Burton concerts. There have already been 2 accidents on the bridge in the last couple of months. There's also been beer bottles in the park that have been left on the road. You know, this huge box of empty beer bottles 2 days in a row. My concern for Red Rocks is that it will be abused and be a huge problem in terms of South Burlington trying to keep it clean and cared for. And the other issue is the noise pollution. I myself will not be attending any of these concerts if they come. But I would hope that the amount of people and how late they get out is controlled, and that there is safe access to an exit, not only the 1-lane bridge and Home Avenue, but also on Shelburne Road at that traffic light, because that will back up as well. Thank you for listening to me, and I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Iris. And now we'll
You're
hear
welcome.
from Linda North.
Hi, y'all. I'm joining because for another reason, but I'm listening intently on this situation with Burton and the higher ground issue. And I have to say, I've walked my dog in Red Rocks probably over 13 years and do a lot of exercise in there even prior to that. And I have witnessed many a time that, I mean, it's a great college place hangout. I've known it since my kids were in high school and finding out about that, and would very much encourage my daughters not to be going out there at all and jumping off the rocks like everyone would do, and not be in a safe manner a lot. It is really, I'm very surprised that Higher Ground is continuing to pursue that location, but I guess maybe we have this Burlington, South Burlington kind of divide on it, but I totally, I'm not a Queen City resident, but I'm hearing what you're talking about. I see it in the paper, and it's, I think it'd behoove all of us in South Burlington to figure out how to get Higher Ground, either to stay in South Burlington or find a better location that does not impact the residents. With all the traffic that we go on that 1-lane bridge, it's going to be terrible. And the, you know, the use of alcohol either before or after these concerts and going into that park is not going to be a safe place. Thank you.
Okay, did you have another item that you wanted to raise as well?
I did it. Or is there anybody else ahead of me?
No.
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 I just wanted to, Helen, everybody put in a commercial for, I'm sure that there's going to be some ARPA discussion, but I'm not totally sure. But I would like to put in an advertisement for the Recreation Center and a look at that and trying to ignite and start that up again for South Burlington. I saw Jesse's very nice presentation at the SBBA meeting last week. Did a great job, and I was looking at one of the statistics. I think we're 20,292 citizens now in South Burlington. And when I moved here in 1995, I don't know what that number was, but I'm sure we've grown at least 40 to maybe 50% from that point in time. I think from the year 2000, we were around 13,000. So it's in 22 years, we've gone from 13,000 or so to 20,000. I started in Y2K, which was year 2000, to coach and volunteer coach in this community. And I coached basketball and softball and soccer for youth here from the K through 12 classes. And I helped start there wasn't any girls soccer in middle school at Tuttle School back then. So I started the girls program and the boys program there with help and borrowing and begging for uniforms and things. But what I also had to beg for was a lot of space to try to do practices. And I'd sit down with Tom Hubbard, who we all know from long ago, where he was the recreation director. And he was very helpful in trying to squeeze any kind of space for us to do practicing. And that was 22 years ago. And a lot less kids than we have now. And I've seen the pods that the schools are having. And implore to all of us to, it's too late for my kids, but I'm trying to pay it forward for the kids that are there that are not representative. And you need to play intramurals, and we need some indoor space for them that we're really lacking tremendously. So that is my commercial for tonight, and I hope that we can bring it up as a community again. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Linda.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else? Oh, yes, please come forward. Yes, there's a mic, and if you'd like to take your mask off so we can understand you perhaps better.
Hi, so my name is Carrie Anderson. I live in Queen City Park, and I wanted to come, I'm just kind of echoing, I guess, what some of the other people have said as well, just the concerns with higher ground, noise, definitely, but also just the safety.
The safety of our neighborhood for, I have 2 teenage boys. They are young drivers, obviously. My son, who's a senior in high school, came home Saturday night, and I was waiting up for him. He was coming home from a friend's house, told me there had been a crash at the bridge. My husband and I went up there the next day to see, and somebody was obviously driving very fast, hit the guardrail, flipped around, and from what I understand, the back end of the vehicle landed up on the other side of the guardrail. We ended up speaking with a neighbor who heard the crash and came out. And apparently the guy who was in the car seemed impaired and wanted help getting his vehicle off the guardrail from the neighbors. So as a parent who has 2 teenage boys, I'm very concerned. My son, who's a senior, missed that crash. It was just a matter of minutes, really. And this is what we have potentially to look forward to with Higher Ground being there many nights a week, up to 1,500 people a night drinking. I have nothing, I've been going to Higher Ground since they were in Winooski. I love Higher Ground, but it's just a really bad area for Higher Ground. So anyway, I just wanted to express my concern with that, and thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to announcements and the city manager's report. So, Megan, you want to start with you?
I'll just announce that I will report on the airport rezoning task force under the committee reports. But I did spend some quality time at the airport last week in particular, and I will again be meeting some of the general aviation folks this week. So just trying to do my due diligence, and it's been
indeed.
very educational.
Okay, thank you. Matt?
Sorry. I'll just report on the GMT during the during afterwards, but I attended the SBBA meeting, and wonderful presentation. Wonderful staff that we have that really present our city well with the new mall owner, or one of the members of the group that bought the mall. Was really wonderful setting. But I heard 2 things that I just wanted to bring to everyone's attention. They both deal with backlog. There was a concern about retail theft, and I think if anyone is associated with the retail industry knows that has been a problem last couple of years, especially. The Chief Burke, showed us the graph. He did a really good job of explaining why we're seeing repeat offenders. And he didn't sugarcoat it. He described exactly what's happening in the court systems, and it has to do with the backlog. A lot of it has to do with COVID. But he did offer his resources. So for anyone out there that has a retail establishment that worries about retail theft, I can say that our police chief and his department are addressing it. They're working on it, but there's no easy fix. The other backlog that I heard a lot about is permitting. There was a concern from those that want to see, as many of us do, changes at the University Mall with this new investment. But there's a concern that our staffing doesn't have enough bandwidth with all the projects that are coming in. And I just wanted to articulate that. And then the last thing, a moment of personal privilege, was just to say that congratulations to the South Burlington girls snowboard team, who are the state champions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Tim?
Thanks. So I did attend the SBBA meeting last week. Thank you very much, Jesse, for a wonderful presentation. Sorry I had to leave early. Sorry I asked so many questions in this same auditorium. There was a CCRPC public hearing again for the Queen City Park Bike Ped scoping. That was, I think, the Wednesday after our last meeting. And it took about an hour. That went well. A lot of feedback from the public. I'm not sure what the next step is, but it's coming pretty soon, I think. Also, I was in Boston over the weekend, and I was in Brookline. And my wife and I noticed that they have the kind of banner set up that on their streetlights that we have. What they did was they took 2 poles, and then they created an array of wire. And on each of the wires in the between, they attached one of those like reflective mylar, materials. And they cut them in different shapes, diamonds, circles, squares, whatnot. And so when we came out of the diner and looked up, the sun was hitting them, and they were just like all shimmering and glistening and kind of like visually vibrating in the wind as they were tilting because the sun was hitting them. So it was a really interesting, beautiful aesthetic on their street, on their streetlights. So I just thought I would mention that. So, and that's all I have.
Okay. I had the wonderful privilege and joy of welcoming a new granddaughter to this earth. So I've spent the last 10 days in Salt Lake City helping her mother and welcoming her, which was wonderful. So I wasn't here. But I did listen in, and I'll talk about that when we get to our reports on counselors on committee assignments. But I did want to note, I took some, what I think are sort of interesting pictures. They're not very good pictures, but there were 2 things that really struck out. We went to some big business in a small strip mall, like most strip malls. Most of it was empty, yet one whole section had been turned into the town. I can't remember the name of the town, their city hall. So they'd taken one of these buildings, and it just reminded me of how South Burlington had utilized some empty space in the mall for our library, and it actually had worked out quite well. And I thought, boy, there's tons of parking, and it really looked nice. But then I did learn later that it's temporary, and they're building a new one. But at least for the time being, they revitalized or reused this mall. Then the other thing, and this is something that Salt Lake is, I think, known for. They don't spend very much on education, but they spend a whole lot on their parks. They have just incredible public parks with facilities, swimming pools, tennis courts, pickleball courts, everywhere. And there's one park I went to. It was fabulous. It had all sorts of amenities. But one thing that I did take pictures of, and I'd love us to think about it in South Burlington, is they had next to one of the numerous kind of climbing, swing gym sets, they had a paved area, and they had a whole bunch of musical instruments. Most of them kind of xylophone type things that were made out of wood and just metal poles, and they had a series of drums, and the kids were playing it, and it was just delightful. It wasn't racket, it wasn't banging and sort of cacophony, but rather, even though they didn't probably really know how to play the xylophone with the sticks and things that they had to strike them, it made beautiful music. And it was really set a beautiful tone for this lovely little park that had, attracted lots of families. And I have some pictures, and I thought it would be an interesting thing to think about for some new parks in South Burlington, or additions to the parks that we have. Thank you.
Did you take video?
No, I didn't. I never think of that. Because the kids were playing. You would have heard the music. Oh, I'm sorry. Well, the next time I go, I'll do that. Okay, so our
Might have to get their signatures or their parents' signatures at least, right? if
As
we're
it
gonna
was,
use it.
So just a couple of quick updates. Also wanted to mention the SBBA meeting and just thank the business community for coming out. We had probably 60 or 70 folks here in the auditorium and joining us for breakfast. It was a great discussion and lots of really interesting questions about city operations. Also want to let the council know that I did present to the school board on the 16th about the charter committee, and asked them, invited them to appoint their 2 representatives to that charter committee. They've obviously got a lot going on, but I'm hoping they do that in April so we can convene that group in May. So more to come on that. I was asked to give you a couple of sentences on it being the season of potholes. I gotta say, I am very thankful this weekend that we are dealing with potholes and not dirt roads in Vermont. So our highway crews have been out filling potholes for about the last 2 weeks. We're obviously doing that with cold patch right now as the paving plants haven't opened yet, but we anticipate them opening in about a month and a half. We do also anticipate having the paving list finalized, the spring paving list finalized by the end of this week, so I will share that with the council when it's complete. The last snowstorm did do some damage around the city. It was really, the land was really soft because we had the thawing phase already. So we are tracking the plow damage throughout the city and we'll be repairing that. And then of course, it's also the season for getting out our street sweepers and line stripers and de-winterizing them and getting them ready for operation. So folks will start seeing street sweepers out in the next couple of weeks. You may all know this, but just for the public as well, our city clerk, Donna, has done an amazing job tracking the reapportionment process at the legislature. So it is looking like we will have 5 state representatives for South Burlington, 1 to be shared with Williston, and then 3 senators for all of South Burlington and one district in Burlington, Shelburne, Heinsberg, Jericho, Underhill, and St. George. So basically South Burlington and CVU for those senators. So more to come on that, but thanks to Donna for all her great work. And then I want to share, for those of you who are coming into the building during work hours, Tom Poon joined our team today as our new welcome desk staff. He is off to a great start, will be the front face of City Hall for a while. Please stop in and say hello. You can come in. Thank you.
Oh, he's coming in.
Just don't drop it.
No food or drink, is this okay?
Yes.
No, out, get out.
You always push the edges.
Yeah.
So with your mouth full, do you have any reports of anything important?
I did send an email to Jesse, and I apologize if you already reported on it. I had a car trouble, so that's why I'm late. But I received a comment from an individual in Barrett Street concerned about potholes. Did you already speak to our pothole addressing plan? My apologies. I'll watch the video.
Send you some bullets.
Okay.
They're not alone. I'll add Delaware to the list.
Yeah, right. All right, moving on to item 6, the consent agenda. We have 3 items, disbursements, February financials, and approve the amended license and stormwater agreement with the city of Burlington for stormwater improvements on Airport Drive.
I'll move to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion?
I did have a question, but let me just find it. Just a minute, sorry. I might have to ask. I don't want to hold everybody up, and I just didn't have the time to look at this on my. Hold on, I'm almost there.
It was about stormwater on Airport Drive because we have the wonderful Christine here from our
It was
team who could answer.
Williston. It was Williston Road. I was curious about what we've paid for Williston Road. I'm not finding it. I was looking at my computer instead of my iPad where I can highlight things, and I cannot find it. And that can come to me after. I
Okay.
was just curious to know.
Yep, happy to follow up with you, Councilor.
All righty. So if there's no further discussion, all in favor of the consent agenda signify by saying aye.
Aye.
So that passes 5-0. Moving on to item 7, consider a resolution condemning the invasion of Ukraine. Certainly that's on everyone's mind. It's hard to not have it on your mind, I think. And Tim Barrett wanted to offer a resolution, and Megan has some amendments to that. But Tim, why don't you start the conversation?
So I am wearing my colors yellow and blue tonight in solidarity with the people of Ukraine in the fight that they have with the invasion by the Russian military. I wrote this resolution. It's pretty short because I don't think there's much that we can argue with about what it's all about and what we resolved to say at the end of it. Megan had some input, which I've added at the end. Jesse had some input that brings in some wording from VLCT that kind of extends the solidarity from at a municipal level, which is also very important, I think, since we are the city of South Burlington. So if you'd like, I could go ahead and read it as it is now, or if we all have copies of it. Or, this is for consideration tonight, and if we agree on wording, we could vote on it if that's okay, but, it's not, it doesn't have to be done tonight, but at least we have a draft.
A framework, yeah.
And, yeah, we have framework. Why don't I read?
Why don't you read it?
Okay.
And then I think Megan has some
Sure.
additional suggestions to perhaps make it more powerful.
Sure. So, whereas Vladimir Putin commanded the Russian military to invade the sovereign democracy of Ukraine on February 24th, 2022, and whereas this invasion was accompanied by missile attacks on civilian targets, and whereas over 3 million, and that might be 5 million now, over 3 million Ukraine inhabitants have been forced from their homes to flee to Poland and other neighboring countries as refugees, and whereas the Russian military is systematically destroying Ukrainian infrastructure and people's homes, and whereas the United States and its allies have joined together in severe economic sanctions against Russia and in supplying armaments to the Ukrainian defense forces engaged in the battle for the preservation of their democracy, now be it resolved that the city of South Burlington strongly condemns the invasion of Ukraine and stands in solidarity with the people of Ukraine, and be it further resolved that the city of South Burlington stands in solidarity with the city, town, and village leaders of Ukraine fighting to protect their people and their democracy, and be it further resolved, the city demands complete troop withdrawal of Russian forces, compensation for all damages, and adjudication of war crimes committed. And be it found resolved that we send a copy of this resolution to a number of people that are mentioned in the very end here, and including our congressional delegation, the president, the vice president, the Speaker of the House, the chairman of Homeland Security, the chairman of the Armed Services Committee, the chairman of Foreign Relations Committee, Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs, and Peter Welch, our rep, and also the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky.
Okay, thank you. Megan, you want to?
Sure. Yeah, I had thought that this was going to be a group resolution, and so I did provide some amendments on Friday, including that last therefore clause. But I think that there's at least one correction that needs to be made, most specifically, which is in the first whereas clause. The expression sovereign democracy is a reference to the Russian, so not Ukrainian, but the Russian plan to include the breakaway territories. And so it, in fact, is pro-Russian and not pro-Ukraine. So I think that historical term needs to be taken into consideration. And that is why I changed that first whereas clause to whereas Vladimir Putin commanded the Russian military to invade the sovereign territory governed by the Democratic Republic of Ukraine on February 24th, 2022. And I think that the other edits that or amendments that I would like to suggest have to do with what makes this particular war one that we would make a pronouncement about. There are many wars going on in the world. The United States is engaged in several. And I think that this kind of very short resolution could apply to a different situation that deserves our attention, which is the Sudan. So I would like us to provide more information in order to explain specifically why Ukraine is deserving of this show of support, to distinguish it from the different conflicts throughout the world. So the other clauses that I include, I wanted in that second whereas clause to mention families, that families who are fleeing are specifically targeted by Russian missile attacks. So I have the second whereas clause reading, whereas this invasion was accompanied by missile attacks on civilian targets, including families fleeing for their lives. There is something that is particularly criminal about this action. And the third whereas clause, I had included moving his third whereas clause down to the fourth. I think that it's just perfect. It could be either way. It was just kind of more, it seemed more progressive in my mind to talk about the destruction. Their infrastructure is destroyed in every war. So what is particular to this war is that the infrastructure as hospitals, schools, of course, government buildings usually are targeted, but transportation routes are usually targeted. But cultural heritage sites and people's homes are criminal actions. And I think that we need to specifically mention that as a reason why we would specifically comment on this situation. Then I go to Tim's third clause. Over 3 million Ukrainian inhabitants have been forced from their homes to flee to Poland and other neighboring countries as refugees. And as my fifth clause, I think it's really important for us to note that there has been conscription. There has been a draft. Families have been separated, and that whereas Ukrainian men between the ages of 18 and 60 years have been conscripted in a war not of their choosing. This is something that I think is really key for me. This is not a civil war for the Ukrainians. This is a war where there is an invader, and we are facing a situation of survival or not. And we see that there has been the imposition of a draft, and men and women are also volunteering, which is why I included the next whereas clause. Many Ukrainians have voluntarily left their peaceful civilian lives to courageously take up arms in defense of their democracy, families, and country, or provide humanitarian assistance. It is really quite remarkable to see how so many people who didn't have to stay in the country did stay, specifically to protect their homeland. This makes Ukraine stand apart. With regard to the last whereas clause, I added on some things. The United States and its allies have joined together in imposing severe economic sanctions against Russia. Against Russia, and I continued on, and in supplying armaments to the heroic Ukrainian forces engaged in a battle for human rights and the preservation of their democracy. Again, I think it's important for us to note that this was an established democracy. That is what I find to be quite compelling. I also think it's important for us to note that we are supplying armaments to the Ukrainian forces. That is not the case in every conflict throughout the world. So in the first, therefore, let it be resolved clause, I think basically keep it. In the second, therefore, let it be resolved clause, I think it's his third, it's Tim's third therefore let it be resolved clause. For my fourth, I instead of separating the people from the leaders, I talked about the city council stands with the Ukrainian people and their president. I can certainly see why we would include city, town, and village leaders. Some of them have been kidnapped and are being held in undisclosed locations. So that, I think, makes sense. But I would put it with the people because they are remaining in their posts to protect their people. I would not keep them separate. It again is a real sign of their commitment to their elected positions and to their investment in democracy, which I think sets this conflict in Ukraine apart. And that's why I add this clause, which comes from John Dewey, who is a Vermonter, who have shown to the world that democracy exists in their minds and hearts. That is something that I talk about with my students in my classroom who are very skeptical about American democracy these days. And I think that Ukraine has reminded Americans of all ages about how democracy is it's an engagement of the mind where we have to understand how it works, but also of the heart where we have to have faith in it. And it is a blind leap of faith. Whenever you put your ballot in a box, it's a blind leap of faith. And they are fully invested in that. So that is where John Dewey comes into play. And I think that my personal request would be that we support their demand for supplemental capability. That I realize is a political statement. I'm willing to take that out, to push back the Russian offensive and defend civilians. And then speaking with Helen this afternoon, she thought that scaling back that last resolve to only send it to the president, to our congressional delegation, and then to President Volodymyr Zelensky would be perhaps enough and sufficient. So I took out the remaining Senate and U.S. House leaders who are in charge of foreign affairs, military affairs, and homeland security.
Okay, what's your thinking? Does anyone have concerns about these amendments, or?
I would love for Tom and Matt and Helen, for you to feel free to
Yeah, I agree.
to add amendments.
Well, you accepted mine. I thought sending it to everyone involved. I might add the governor of the state of Vermont, because he's been pretty
Oh, yes. That's right.
proactive and strong about this.
I forgot.
But
I'm
I think
sorry, Helen.
it's our people and the two presidents and our governor.
Yeah.
And I like, and you mentioned it, and I think where I would make, include Jesse's suggestion from the League of Cities and Towns, that we stand in solidarity with the city, town, and village leaders of Ukraine. I think in your third resolve, that the city council stands with the Ukrainian people and their president. I think you then could say, the city, town, and village leaders of Ukraine who have shown to the world that democracy exists in their hearts and minds. I think that would be a good place to put that. And I agree. I think that's important to include.
Yep.
Because that's how it really could resonate with this city council.
Yep.
Tom, do you have any thoughts or edits, or?
I don't have any strong objections to what Councilor Emery is articulating, but I only received it this afternoon, and I will say I have a lot of things going on, and for me to offer any thoughtful insight as to the specific points raised, I would need to take it until the next meeting before I would feel comfortable with altering any of them. Nothing that you said seemed to rub me the wrong way as you were articulating them, but if we really want to dive deeper into this and commit more of our council time on this important topic, I would need more time between now and the next meeting.
Would it be helpful to have, well, let's hear from Matt and then Tim, and then maybe we can get a sense of what we could prepare for everyone to look at as the final, or the draft for the final vote for the following meeting. I know, as Tim said, there's no need to do it tonight, so we could have that as a addition to the next short meeting. No. Matt?
I think it was well-written, and I think the amendments that you offered, Councilor Reilly and Councilor Emery, are well-written, and I would sign on.
Great. Tim, are you
So
on board?
what I'd like to do is take Megan's amendments and look at them closer, because I haven't had enough time to do that, and then see which ones I'd really like to add in, because I think some of them I do, and the other ones we could talk one-on-one about it, and then negotiate, and that we'll come back with a combined draft at the
Okay.
before the next meeting, and we'll circulate it first, right?
That
so
would
you
be
can-
great.
Yeah. Is that
All
okay,
right.
Megan?
Well, I thank you.
Yeah, I
Okay.
mean, I still would hope that the council could discuss. I mean, I think-
Yeah, yeah.
I don't want to, but sure, we can talk about it first, but I really think that this is the first time I've ever, as a counselor, spoken out about a war. And so this is a solemn moment. And I think that what Tom said about needing time to reflect I completely agree. And I think that we should all be involved in what the final language looks like, because this is important. We know as Americans that our government enters into many military conflicts and in various ways, and we have a complex history, and so that complexity, I think we all need to have sit with us and reconcile with it as we put forward a statement.
What's really important to me is to articulate as clearly as possible the human toll. And I like some of your suggestions because they put that in clear language, and I just didn't word it correctly and didn't add enough to it. So to me, human toll comes first, and then the cultural architecture, right, infrastructure, and the complete decimation of their society by causing approximately 5 million people to flee the country and leave, right? So this is the destruction of a country, a huge country that we're seeing in real time, caused by one man and his military. And I just want to make a statement on it that we all agree on and can sign off. And
The human toll exists in every war, and so I think that there is more than the human toll that constitutes the crime that's being committed right here before our eyes. And that's why, even though art museums and schools may not seem important, they're in fact very important. And to one's identity as Ukrainian, they are tragic, these losses. I mean, for people to show on social media pictures of Kyiv and Mariupol and all these places where people didn't even live, but that were part of their cultural heritage. I mean, can you imagine if the Statue of Liberty was bombed? Now, that might not kill anybody, but can you imagine? I mean, just think, what that would do to us psychologically. And that's a crime. And I think that we can't underestimate for the survivors the cost of hospitals, schools, cultural heritage sites. You listen to people on the news and they say, this won't be rebuilt for 40 or 50 years. I mean, it's destruction. And it's genocide. They're calling it genocide. And genocide is the destruction of a culture, not just of lives, but of a culture. So it goes beyond the numbers, which we find in every war, sadly.
Agreed. Okay, so we'll look for a final statement. And I do like the really connection with the preservation of democracy.
Yes.
I think we have seen that attacked even here in the United States, but certainly the diminution of democracies around the world, and that's, as a strong believer in democracy, that's very concerning, and that's probably why so many of us really relate to this along with seeing it on social media almost constantly. I mean, I said to Megan, if this had, or my husband, you know, if we had social media in 1939, we would be watching the deportation of Jews to concentration camps, and we probably wouldn't have waited till Pearl Harbor. And that's how this strikes me. You're just seeing a destruction of a culture and a people every day, you know, hour by hour. So it really hits home. So I think I would like this to be a really good, strong statement for all of those aspects. So I thank both of you for putting the time in. And
Yeah, actually, in a conversation with Helen where we were talking about this about 10 days ago, Helen talked about what set Ukrainian apart for her, which was the democracy, that it was a thriving democracy. And that's what tipped me to say, okay, I'm ready to sign on. So it is, I think, really essential.
okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank
Good
you.
enough. Okay, moving on to item 8. This is the opportunity for councilors and the public to share information and resources on climate change. I know, Matt, there's been a lot of activity in Montpelier, if you want to.
Yeah, absolutely. But there's two particular items that have not really gotten a lot of press that I think are really important, both for our Energy Committee, our Climate Committee, and our Planning Commission. There's a lot of numbers here, but I'll try to say it as succinctly as I can, which is H518, which is done. It's out of the House, over to the Senate, and that's $46 million. Again, we have all these outlandish, very large numbers that we haven't seen because of ARPA, right? These aren't typical, and it's pretty remarkable to see how much money that's flowing in and out of Montpelier. But $46 million in federal ARPA funds available to all towns for energy efficiency, up to $250K per project. So these are competitive grants, but if everyone got a grant of a maximum amount, that's 183 towns. So some things that I think the Energy Committee and the Climate Committee could consider. Now, obviously, we don't need $250,000 in energy efficiency upgrades to this beautiful building, but we do have other buildings, non-schools, can't be schools, has to be municipal buildings, that could certainly use some upgrades in equipment and insulation. Right.
Why can't schools be included in these funds?
They have their own money,
Because
don't
it's
they?
ESSER, it's just totally separate?
It's the federal ARPA rules.
But do you know why?
I don't know why. A lot of this stuff is laws are passed, I'm learning. Laws are passed in Congress, and lawyers then have to interpret the laws that the lawmakers passed in Congress to the people that count the money in the State House. I'm learning, anyways. But there's a $250,000 that, again, is going to be competitive grants. You can't sit on your hands. You have to apply for this once it becomes law, and it will become law. There's no opposition. The other is the big bill, which is the transportation bill, H736. And the important thing, I think, for the Planning Commission in this respect is the money that's being used, money available from ARPA that is going to be made available. Again, it's not through the Senate, but it will likely be retained in some manner, but $20 million to build out the fast charging corridor. And they're specific, at least the House bill is, could change, specific on where those level 3 fast chargers can go. 1 mile from any exit on 89 and 91 and that little bit of 93 that we have in the Northeast Kingdom. But essentially, there is going to be grant money available for building fast charging networks, level 3 fast chargers, somewhere on exit 14. So if the Planning Commission might want to think, where would we best put this? And then, of course, cooperate with the landowner to apply for the grant in order to build that out. I don't know where that is. I don't know if it can be put there. I don't know if it makes sense there, but there's money available if it's within 1 mile of 14. And the other is the other state highway corridors, which are 4, 7, 2, and 9. Importance for us, of course, is 7. So where on Shelburne Road could you put a level 3 fast charger within 20 miles of each other? So if Shelburne gets it, South Burlington might not. It's this interesting grant-making procedure in which they're going to look at all the grants and they're going to want to make sure that they're 20 miles away, all the way from Burlington, all the way down to Bennington, and then on 2, and then on 9. So,
And how many per 20-mile?
well,
Grouping.
they like to do them in packs of 4, but these are very expensive, right? So early on, there were reports of people were saying they were installing 2 for $175,000, but because of the global supply chain problem, which is causing problems for everything, they're now saying $400,000 for a 2-pack. I don't know what it will end up being. Likely the prices will go down as more are made, but this money is going, for not every state is spending it this way, but many states are building out their charging network. So the demand on these level 3 equipment is going to be significant. The opportunity for South Burlington, again, with the money for energy efficiency, that's one pot, and then the access to grants for level 3 chargers. It doesn't have to be private property. Could be the state, the city could apply, but maybe it will be a gas station or a grocery store or a library. I don't know, but there's some opportunities that will come up if this becomes law, and I expect it will, and that opportunity will avail itself in July 1.
What about provisions to help landlords of large apartment buildings be able to add level 2 chargers?
Yes, so there is also language in the transportation bill to ensure that, right, because if you don't have a garage, you don't have 200 amp service, you rent your property, how are you going to charge your car? And so there is money available for multifamily housings to access grants for chargers. I don't know how well that will work, but there's a pot of money for that as well.
In addition to this 20 million?
In addition to this 20 million.
Well, that's important for the planning commission to know too.
Yeah, for someone designing a multifamily, they should take advantage of this largesse from the federal government.
Well, I mean, do our LDRs provide for the requirement to at least have the infrastructure to put a level 2 charger at a multifamily unit now?
Is that part of what the climate action plan is talking about, making sure that every new building has 200 amp service? I mean, isn't that standard now? But
I don't know.
I mean, it's something they should consider.
Well, that's another thing that we
Yeah.
absolutely should
Yeah.
What's 200
consider. And I
F
think the
service?
Energy Committee, I mean, the Climate Task Force is, but
Right.
they're working on a lot of recommendations. They're just moving on to transportation now, which I mean, that's both things. You need it for transportation as well as building.
What's 200 F service?
200 amp service.
Amp
If you're
service,
going to
sorry.
plug in an electric car or use a cold climate heat pump, you need 200 amp service. So,
Thank
so
you.
in many cases, some older homes can't immediately go to an electric car or electric heat until they upgrade their electrical infrastructure. And there's actually money for that as well.
Yeah, that's pretty expensive, but if there's money for it, yeah. Tom, I'm sorry, are you
that's it.
done? Is that good? Tom?
To Councilor Emery's point, so the separate bucket of fund is called the ESSER funds, Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief, and so that was $31 million allocation to the state of Vermont. as
It's
part
so
of this.
little compared to ARPA.
40, you said 456 million?
Yeah.
No, 46
Yeah, 46
million
million.
for
This-
energy efficiency in municipal buildings.
Just for one, we got $250 million.
There were 2 ESSER bundles, so that was the
For
first one, and
affordable
then there's a
housing.
second one. But for this first one of 31 million, 10% of it was allocated to the state of Vermont, and what we provisioned last year is that 10 million, that 10% of that amount, or the 3 million, sorry, not 10 million, the 3 million is to use to prioritize and inventory all of the school buildings throughout the state for asbestos, for PCBs, the measurements. So we actually have been taking testimony on that. So we're doing a good job of focusing the Agency of Education to really articulate all of the buildings out there so that we can get these monies to where it's needed most, starting with our friends in Burlington who need a new high school.
It strikes me that the municipal side gets so much more, and I don't quite know why this country does not fund its public education. It just is.
So that was ESSER 1. ESSER 2 funds, which came in December 2020, was a total of 126 million.
Which is still much less than the municipal side. We got 1-point-something billion, the state of Vermont, in ARPA funds. I mean, right? Why?
It's
Yeah.
based on different formulas, and then there's the ESSER 3 funds, which is total to LEAs 256 million. There's a lot of money coming to the schools as well. So whether or not it's disproportionate to municipal entities, that's the first time I've heard that take. But I will definitely dig into a fact of how those were calculated.
I mean, it's maybe more of a rhetorical question. I don't know that a state senator needs to get into the workings of Congress, but it's an interesting
Well, a couple
question.
want to.
What'd
Oh,
you
sorry,
say?
that was too loud.
I said a couple
I
want
should have
to,
laughed that loud. I take that back.
but
Good
anyway.
one, though.
Okay. Well, thank you. That's good insight and really helpful. And I'm quite certain the task force will have this update and pull that into their recommendations.
And sorry,
sure.
just to add up, VLCT, I'm sure will
Yeah.
do their due diligence, which is make sure every town has access to the information in the grant writing process at the same time, so no town takes advantage of. But we're pretty good at applying for grants, and we're pretty organized, so I think
Yeah,
that bodes well for us.
Well, and we're really talking about it.
Yeah.
So we're, I think, well poised to jump on these opportunities.
Yeah, and if I may, we did get a reach out from CCRPC, a heads up that Efficiency Vermont's teaming up with VLCT in anticipation of H518 coming through. So they're providing free walkthroughs of municipal structures. So we've actually have Greg and Lou kind of on that to kind of get us on the list. I mean, fire department's a great example. Station 1, Wheeler House, Public Works. We do have some aged buildings that could use some efficiencies. So.
Yeah,
Great. Well, that's good.
yep.
Super. All righty.
One comment about energy efficiency?
Yes, please.
When, do we have the solar panels back up on City Hall? No.
No, so the engineers are still working on a
Still
final
working.
design. So
Okay.
they're working as quickly as possible.
More clamps.
More clamps, correct? Yes.
Okay.
Because the panels are too flexible? Because they're bifacial? Is that part of the problem?
There was an engineering defect, frankly,
Ooh,
that
okay.
occurred with their third party. So they're correcting that in this design and over-engineering.
Yep, okay.
Assume it's all under warranty.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And we're tracking any differences in what we're receiving from the energy credits as well.
Okay.
Oh, and they'll make good on that difference, we hope?
We hope.
Okay. Well, you won't know until you ask, huh? All right. It looks like Ethan Goldman would like to make a comment, and he's chair of both the Energy Committee and the Climate Task Force.
Thanks. And I've passed the torch on the Energy Committee to Tim Perrin, but
Oh, okay,
yes,
sorry.
I'm speaking here at my personal capacity, but thanks for the introduction, Helen. And I just wanted to make a suggestion about the EV charger funding. And my thought was that looking at the increase in the amount of EVs that are likely to be in circulation in the next few years, the number of EV chargers is going to far exceed what this one grant will do. And so I wonder if there are ways that we could use this funding as catalyzing to get a lot of the business owners around the highway to think about what the benefits for them would be if they were to have even level 2 chargers by their businesses. And so I wonder if there's a way that we could put the word out and solicit proposals from businesses about why their business would be a great place to have a level 3 charger, what the benefits would be to their business if it brought in more traffic, and encourage people to stay longer at their business while their car was charging and things like that. And if that process might get them to think about, even if they aren't selected for the grant, maybe other ways that they could find funding and justify investments in more chargers. It would be great if we got 5 or 10 different places thinking about, actually maybe it is a cost-effective investment and they should look for other places to get grants or things like that. So I think that it's always great when you've got a great big pot of money like this to get everyone's attention and get a lot of focused thought. Really, the chargers, should be benefits in and of themselves that hopefully don't just require grants to put in, and that we can find other sources of funding and other rationales for putting them in. So I'm just thinking about how we can use this as a way to publicize the need for more chargers.
Okay. Are you also suggesting that it might be like a match? So you apply and let's say 4 gas stations all decided they do want to have one. and they're willing to put up half the money or, whatever. Is that something that you can do with the money, do you think, Matt?
I know it'll be a competitive grant-making process through the AOT, but probably may change as it gets to the Senate Transportation Committee to determine how it's spent. But that right now, it's a competitive grant-making process with the Agency of Transportation, and the gentleman there is named Patrick Murphy, and he's the go-to person that Ethan or anyone else on the Energy or Climate Committee would go to about asking details about how they could access those funds in the transportation bill, should it become law,
Yeah.
assuming it will.
Well, it might be a good suggestion, Tom, about having that money go farther than it would if it was a plain old grant and that's all, versus how do you really parlay it into, 10 stations, not 5.
I think it's really important that, there are some changes going on in EVs, and that the range keeps increasing, like every couple of model years, it goes up quite a bit. And most cars spend most of their time at night at home. That's their that should be their docking station. And where people don't have access to even 110 to plug in for overnight, if they just wanted to get like 10 or 12 miles, right? That, to me, is super unfair. So people who live in homes with garages who get a free level 2 charger from GMP when they buy a pluggable hybrid or a full electric vehicle, right? The people that live in apartments are at a severe disadvantage. And we're going to have a really hard time getting them to buy into the EV concept if they can't even charge it at home. So, my point is that the money should not be going so much to fast chargers up and down Route, 89, 93, and 7 and 2. It should be in getting people to be able to charge at home so they can buy their vehicle that has a 300-mile range and maintain that on a daily basis because they have to go to work and come back, let's say, right? So, and to get more businesses for people. So cars normally go from home to work, right? So if you can't charge at home, you should at least be able to charge at work. I work at one of the state's largest employers. I have been begging for car chargers at the state's largest consumer of electricity. And I can't get them to do anything about that, right? And I can't complain. I'm just saying, there have been opportunities to work with GMP to get grants. I've pursued those. They haven't happened, right? And there's a number of reasons why. It's all about infrastructure and where your power is and where your transformers are and where your parking lot is. The point is that, with the right amount of incentive, sometimes people will do those things that you need them to do, so.
Chair Riley?
Well, it's good that your Monday night meeting has this opportunity for you, or offers that. So your part-time work allows you to recharge.
Hobby Lobby.
I have to leave.
Tom?
So Tim, we have that. We approved that last year too. We have the multi-unit dwelling electric vehicle charging. It's $1 million within last year's budget, and it's up to $80,000 per site, $300,000 per applicant. We took a lot of testimony on this, and we actually had a lot of back and forth on what the requirements for those charging units are. And one thing that was a sticking point, the industry really didn't want to require swipes because they don't last as long, but we wanted to make it as accessible because it's prioritizing affordable housing to anybody with any type of swipe card that doesn't necessarily have a smartphone, but they could have a cash card of sorts. So we are working on this. If anything, you're inspiring me to, when we get the T-bill this week, which just got out of the House, to ask how many of these grants were actually deployed last year, and that will be reported on in the coming weeks, and that will look to the coming year if we need to allocate more dollars for it.
Good. Okay, thank you. Moving on then, to item 9, but before we go there, I just want to acknowledge there are apparently a number of people from Queen City Park who joined a little late and had wanted to make comments. And I guess rather than go back to that item earlier in the agenda, what I will say is we've heard you loud and clear. We've taken comments on a number of evenings, and we'll be discussing our role, I guess, in executive session. But we heard you, and I don't think we necessarily have to hear anyone else. So I don't mean to diminish your interest in participating, but we really have heard you loud and clear, and I appreciate all of the emails and comments that have been shared regarding that. So thank you. So moving on to item 9, receive a recommendation on public engagement as we consider allocating the American Rescue Plan Act ARPA funds. So Andrew Balduke is going to take us through that.
Sure. Thank you, Chair, really. So back at the February 22nd meeting, we kind of had an initial discussion about big picture goals for expending these funds. At that meeting, we talked about that there's about approximately $4 million remaining. I think it was a very good discussion. My takeaway from that, I identify in the memo in your packets, and there are sort of four main takeaways. Number one, that with these funds, we want to maximize community impact. What's the biggest bang for our buck going to be? We want to emphasize affordability in the community. Particularly, the council has talked about at least $1 million for affordable housing being allocated for that purpose. Talked about our climate goals and initiatives. And also talked about, finally, what great ideas are out there that we haven't thought of and what community outreach might look like in the community. So I've outlined in the memo sort of some next steps and some ideas around community outreach. Overall, this is not, we have, as council's aware, over a $50 million annual budget. This is not a huge drop in the bucket for the overall municipal services that we provide, but this is an incredible opportunity. And community outreach is something the council has identified in its policy priorities and strategies session. How are we doing as a government entity? What services does the community need? And I think the community outreach for ARPA funds is a great opportunity to kind of look at that and get out in community and sort of ask the community where they see priorities, where they see these dollars being best spent. So I've outlined kind of a community engagement process that has built in at least 4 community listening sessions. I'm thinking that those could take place outside of just City Hall, but in other areas of the community. I shared the survey that the city of Burlington did. I think the town of Jericho also had a really interesting model around ranking priorities. Sort of, if you had $100 to spend, where would you spend that in the community? And to prioritize different projects that we come up with or different goals that we come up with. Thinking that survey we'd come back with at a later council meeting for council further input into that. And I don't want to, and in saying that, I don't want this survey just to be about ARPA funds. I think, again, this is a great opportunity for broader community outreach to also talk about, other priorities that community has, build this into something a little bit bigger than that. And one other thing, I don't want committees to know we're still thinking of them in this process. We do have, and it's the next item on the agenda, the council's policy priorities and strategies, which will be starting in April and May, going for the FY23. And I think it'd be a good idea along with that, as committees are building out their work plans, thinking about what they've done in the last year, and providing feedback on what those policy priorities and strategies should be for FY23. I think to add on to this, sort of what are your ARPA ideas? With that, the framework, as we talked about at the last council meeting, we don't want to just split this up into 10 different buckets. Each group gets $400,000. Committees to actually think about big picture. What's the biggest bang for our buck? What's going to have the greatest community impact through the lens you have as residents and in your specialized areas of interest. So with all that, engagement, feedback, coming back to the council, sort of this would stretch out through the summer, coming back to council the first meeting in September to begin to talk about next steps. Mm-hmm. So those are my big picture thoughts.
Great. Comments, yes.
Yeah, I had one
Megan.
question about the neighborhoods the outreach would happen in. I do like that it would be multilingual survey, but yet if it's an online survey, I'm not sure many people who would require multilingual services would actually go online to fill it out. So I was curious how that survey would be delivered. And then I saw the 4 main neighborhoods, City Center, Gateway, Lakeshore, and Ridgeline. And again, if we're looking to include people who might not naturally or very easily come forward to participate, I would go specifically to the Farrell Apartments. I would go specifically to all of our condos, and I would also go to some areas in Chamberlain neighborhood. I think that there is just, we need to go beyond, what calling a public meeting involves, to actually go to where these people are and make it easy for them to participate. So.
Yeah. Agreed. Thank you, Megan. It's certainly a priority that we have that, and there are some good models that have been built out there that other municipalities on equitable community engagement, and that's certainly a priority in this process. I was talking with a school district today, and they have over 20 languages spoken in the school district,
Yep.
Which is really remarkable. And Jesse shared at the SPBA meeting the number of languages or percentage of households that speak something other than English at home. It's a huge percentage in South Burlington. So, so absolutely, point very well taken. Thank you.
Good. Oh, Tom, I'm sorry.
I had a comment, but I want to echo what Councilor Emery just said. I go to Burlington NPA, Neighborhood Planning Associations, and they're all over the town, and I just love how cohesive they are for the smaller areas of each of the city, and it really creates community. And I love the notion of maybe looking at our districts, the new districts with the new census, and trying to think of ways to engage them on as a cohesive neighborhood, be it the Chamberlain neighborhood, the Orchard neighborhood, or so on. I definitely support that. I also want to add with surveys, I just would strongly encourage us to not require identification, but ask for it, because otherwise I've had bad experience in the past where some advocacy group will just start bombarding with anonymous responses in order to persuade the dialogue. So I will give credit to more that identify who the feedback is from than just 1,000 or 500 anonymous entries all calling for the same thing. So I'm not a fan of anonymity.
Again, getting to the equity issue, a lot of immigrants don't want to put their names down.
Sure.
So I would prefer that we not give weight to, I mean, we can certainly say optional, but I would not want to give weight to.
As long as we ask for the name, that's all I ask for. And it doesn't have to be required, so if they want to keep it anonymous, that's fine.
Yeah.
But whatever.
Any other thoughts from the right side? Looks good. Am I right? To my right, the public's left, so you get to sit in both spots?
Stage right. No, this looks good. Yeah.
Okay,
Can-
good.
Can I
Yes.
just underline a point Andrew made, which was a great point. I just want to elevate it a little bit. I think our vision for this is we are going to get a huge amount of feedback through this process, hopefully, that we don't use in an ARPA decision, right? We're going to fund 2 to 5 things, and we're going to get thousands of ideas. And really wanting to set the expectation from the start that this is part of a larger conversation about how we're building community and our plans for the future. And it lines up actually really well with kicking off the comprehensive plan update. So thinking that all of that data can also flow into what we're prioritizing moving into our next comprehensive plan.
Matt?
Jesse, how do you plan to staff the listening sessions? Andrew? That's it, just Andrew?
This was his idea, so
He's got 2 ears.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll let Andrew.
Well, facilitating is a very important job, and
Yeah.
I know you know that, but I just.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, certainly me. I also think, we have experts in City Hall that do this work. Yeah, I think involving, especially because this is, the comp plan will be on the heels of this, involving planning and zoning to some degree. I think that'll be important as well. But I know there's another committee that's considering sort of a facilitator for facilitated discussions and a professional, and I don't necessarily know if we need that, but we can talk about it.
Yeah, I don't know either, but I do know, having been to so many of these things, that's really important that the facilitator is not the note taker. So bring a friend.
Yeah. I also,
Good point.
our city has an incredible amount of very talented professionals who may very well be professional facilitators, but who would also be willing to donate their time to do some of this. Not every single one of them, but, you know, 1 or 2 sessions in their neighborhood or something, or another neighborhood if they don't want to have to interact with their neighbors. So that might be another way to get a number of facilitators that are really talented.
One more idea on that I've heard Andrew talk about is, you know, yes, going into neighborhoods and finding those where folks are is really important, and how you hear from all voices, and also using those formal and informal leaders to help facilitate. So, you know, if we hold a listening session at the mosque, getting the imam to help with that facilitation. So it's not just us going in, but it's us building up those formal and informal leaders across the community to help provide us that feedback as well.
And it's really important to say at the outset that, you know, this is a visioning, that this is not a request that will lead to anything tangible. So because when people ask and they don't receive, there can be huge disappointment. So just really making it clear from the outset that, like you said, there are going to be 4 to 5 things that this is going to lead to. We're going to receive 1,000 ideas. And so we're really just trying to, you know, get an idea of where those 1,000 ideas lie in order to determine what the 4 to 5. So this is step 1. And when we start sifting, that we would like also for them to come and express their viewpoint.
Yeah, I thought on the survey it would be fascinating to ask one question with, you know, 100 ARPA dollars, what are priorities? And then the second, a follow-up question with 100 increase in tax dollars, where would you like that money? And where the differences might lie. I think that part of the setting expectations a little bit.
Right, yeah. Free money versus your money.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it changes your choices sometimes. Okay. Any other comments or thoughts?
I have to put a plug out there for Hamilton, the musical.
Oh.
Something I saw. And when we're talking about, you know, ARPA money and, you know, he put together this kind of national banking system, and just our discussion about democracy earlier with regard to the war in Ukraine. I just have to say that I recommend it very highly. It's an amazing musical. Disney Plus made it possible to see it from the comfort of your house, and this is an amazing thing, and it's maybe thanks to Hamilton.
You only got one shot.
Huh?
Only got one shot.
That's right. You know the song. That's right.
And when Andrew and I were talking about this today, we started the conversation talking about, are we Hamiltonians or are we Jeffersonians?
See? Look at there. We were on the same wavelength. There we go. That's so funny.
Ethan, did you want to make another comment or question?
Yeah, I have a question, well, sort of a question or a comment on the process for gathering ideas on how to allocate the ARPA money. And it was already mentioned that there's some sustainability and efficiency goals that will be on the list. But I know when we look at energy efficiency and sustainability projects, it's sort of a common practice there to try to quantify the benefits together with the costs and sort of see the money as an investment that brings back, you know, continual benefits to the community, you know, in various different ways. And I wonder if there is already some thought going on about how to look at the wide range of different proposals that may come in terms of what their benefits may be, so that certainly things that are popular, I understand that, you know, that there's going to be a strong affinity for those, but it would be great if there was some kind of structure for trying to, not everything is quantifiable, but trying to quantify or at least get a sense of the magnitude of the benefit that will flow throughout the community and over the longer term from this initial investment, so that we can really understand how the priorities will benefit.
That's good. Can the survey ask, you know, you're asked to identify 3 choices or something, and then you're also asked to articulate the benefit the larger community benefit for supporting. Is that what you're kind of saying?
Well, I think it's great if the person who's suggesting the spending idea has a structured idea about how to quantify the benefit. But I suspect that this might be a place where we'd be better served by getting some expert advice to come up with some kind of a framework and try to quantify these things. I mean, I think the public information gathering is a great way to sort of open up our ideas, but the quantification of benefit is sort of part of the funneling down of trying to figure out which ones are the best ones. And I think that probably we have some resources. I'm not going to point to who they are or how we get them, but I think getting some expert support in coming up with that kind of scoring rubric would probably be the best way to do it in a consistent fashion.
Okay. Andrew
nodding
in agreement.
Yeah, I mean, I think when we bring forward the results, and something we can think about a lot is that'll absolutely be sifting through it all and coming up with a scoring system that that's going to be how we're going to get to a final decision point.
Right.
And there are other communities out there that there are some frameworks that we can pull from, and or if it's if council feels like they want something a little bit bigger than that, we can look at resources through the league or any of our various other partners.
Okay, thank you. Good enough. Okay, moving on to item 10, if everyone's ready. We're going to receive the FY22 policy priorities and strategies, report number 2.
So this is our second report to you of the policies and strategies you adopted in November. As Andrew said, this is a process that we hope to kick back off with the council and the committees and the leadership team towards the end of April for another retreat, another pulling together in June. There's a lot of information here. We have included anything that has changed since our last update in red, so you can kind of scan down and see those new things. My intention was not to read through this or highlight anything specific. I talked to you about a lot of these things a lot anyway, but I think it's helpful to have one resource that you can go back to and pull updates from if you are so inclined. So I'm happy to answer, Andrew and I are happy to answer any questions you have about specific updates, but really this is meant as a ongoing resource for you to use over time.
Just
Yes.
feedback. I didn't know the red was the update, and so I just figured this was what we had put together last summer. So I just maybe some note with a cover sheet just saying the red is what have, the items that have been implemented or.
It says updates in red text at the very top, the first page.
All right, see, so it's just my eyes. I can't see that. I'm sorry.
Right?
Yes, that's true, but you have to kind of know to look there.
Well, yeah,
This is great. Love it.
but it was great. I loved it. It was pretty impressive, I think, in many ways about how much was accomplished, I thought. And, clearly you read through some of them and they're going to take a lot longer. There was one on the airport that hadn't made too much progress, but we're working on that. And
to me, that's part of
that
the
was good.
strength of this process is all tasks are not created equal. Some you can kind of see success on right away, and some are kind of moving in the background. So it allows us to not lose those things that are moving in the background, so you hear some sentences about them.
right, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm just glad to know that the red is the update. I wasn't quite sure. I thought it was going to be verbal. Okay.
And I'm happy if you go back tonight or next week and have questions, feel free to just.
Has there been any follow-through then about the youth center and the outreach to Dr. Travia Childs? I know that having spoken with Andrew Hayes of the East Real Estate Group, that he is keen on keeping the youth center in whatever the U-Mall property becomes, which I think is wonderful. But I'm just curious if there was any feedback from the youth that she's working with regard to the library. No, if that would be on the sheet if there were.
I think those conversations between Jennifer and Dr. Childs are pretty nascent still.
Okay.
I know they've connected a couple times via email, and they have a real interest in working together. I think that the relationship has been established, but I don't think there's a specific outcome
Yeah.
of those conversations yet.
Yeah, just having been in touch with Dr. Childs, what I would say is that she is a workforce of one, and the task is immense. And she is really building something from the ground up. And so I think that any support that the library or Holly could provide to Dr. Childs, even in terms of advice, she's really building from the ground up, and she doesn't have a blueprint. And she gives time. She stays longer. She opens when high schoolers say, we want to use the space for this. She says, okay, I'm coming over, I'll open up. So she is accessible. She's really, very generous with her time. But yeah, I think any support that we could provide so that center and the director of that center can be sustainable would be welcome.
And she has a whole nother almost full-time job at this point.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yes, yeah. So she's put out SOS, but, people who do this for a living might be able to help her not have to reinvent the wheel.
Yep.
Okay.
Can I just ask a quick question?
Yes, you certainly may.
I just see that, I love this point, and I'm glad it's there. The city owns spaces for community use, focus on events at the city center, and that we've had baby showers, bridal showers, birthdays, and HOA meetings in the senior center in February, March. It says we're charging, are we charging just for cleanup, or is this a money-making enterprise? What are we?
There's a whole fee structure associated with the senior center and our upstairs spaces.
Right.
That's primarily based around what it costs to staff the building to have somebody here while it's open.
It's covering costs.
It's covering costs.
It's not
Yeah.
that makes sense.
Yeah, the goal, the conceptual goal behind it was that it would fund itself, the senior center.
Good. Yep, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for appreciating the document.
Okay.
Can I just make one comment?
Yes, you
So
may.
the thing that worries me a lot is, where I work, we were warned recently of an uptick in cyber attacks coming from Eastern Europe. And so I worry about the city's IT infrastructure and all the employees that use email and the degree that they're fully educated on being careful about clicking links that come from external sources and how to are they well educated in how to check and look at the source of the email and the source address and be suspicious and then, and then identify phishing emails and stuff like that and be able to forward it back to the IT people. So, because the last thing I want to see is a piece of malware, affect the city operations. It's so critical. It's already affected hospitals and cities and municipalities all over the country, right? Power stations, hydro dams, so vigilance. So anyway, thanks. Great document.
Yeah. What is advantage? Oh, sorry. You were going to respond?
I agree, Tim. I think a refresher with staff just on some of those kind of low-hanging fruit things that can be done to avoid cyber scams. But just from a bigger picture, we are contracted with SimQuest right now, and we're going through Office 365 implementation. And that includes multi-factor authentication for both remote and administrator users in the city across all departments. So that process will be completed in mid-April. It's something that the industry as a whole is seeing a huge uptick in this level of compliance. And it's driven largely by insurers of all things so we have a rider on our a short-term extension on our cybersecurity policy that will be renewed again once we're fully compliant.
Mm-hmm. What is it?
Oh, go ahead.
What is Advantage Tennis for the tennis courts at the Samansky Park?
Where are you looking?
I am on page 46 of our packets under Affordable and Community Strong.
I think there's
So
a striping company that
Yeah, my understanding is that they're a construction company, a surfacing company that specifically specializes in
Pickleball?
updating tennis courts,
Okay.
not just regular paving. And they may also offer some connection to programming.
And I would add pickleball.
And
That's
pickleball.
what they're doing at
Pickleball,
Semantic.
yeah.
Well, I'm
They do.
specifically asking because
paper
we
hears that.
have community members who are very eager to have their pickleball courts become.
Did the other paper hear that? Pickleball courts are coming.
That's the Semantic.
Right. I was just gonna suggest, I'm just wondering, I'm not very tech savvy, but I have developed a little bit of a sensitivity to weird emails that I get that I just delete. But I'm just wondering if there's a list of, I don't know, 6 common things to look for, if we could publish that in the bi-monthly information sheet, or maybe have it posted on the website so that people who aren't very savvy but have heard about this and don't really know what to look for. Because some of them come in and use the library, computers. So I just think that's computer literacy that might
Yeah.
be helpful given this increase in
Yeah.
cyber activity by Russia.
That's in North Korea. That's
North
a
Korea, yeah.
good point. There's a club at the high school. My son used to be part of it, and they do outreach for computer security. What to click on, what not to click on, what looks suspicious. And I wonder if they would, looking at how to have teenagers and youth more active in our library, if they would come and do some kind of community forum for people and library users. I think that would be really useful. My son would go to retirement villages.
Was that part of Technology for Tomorrow?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Yeah. And then by EC, is that the Economic Committee or is that something else? On page 47 of our packet, under opportunity-oriented, develop metrics for fiscal and economic development. Do we have a tax-based goal? What do we need to be financially sustainable? How do we support a grand list growth that enables this? And is that the Economic Development Committee?
Yes.
EC? Okay.
Yep, exactly.
Okay.
Okay, great. So let's move on to, excuse me, item 11, which is convening as the South Burlington Liquor Control Commission to consider a whole bunch more of liquor licenses in our city.
I'll move that we enter the Liquor Control Board.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, so I don't know how many we have. I'm not going to read them. I would just observe we certainly seem to have a lot of liquor licenses in this community. I remember way long time ago when my husband when we lived in Burlington and he was on the city council and was on the liquor commission or something. And there was always conversation about how many liquor licenses could certain communities have in all the 4 corners, that you didn't really need 4 in certain areas in downtown Burlington. It had some repercussion, but I don't know if that's an issue for us, but it seems like we do have a lot.
It is very helpful with our local options tax.
Oh, it is, for sure. But it also carries with it some consequences, I suppose. So I haven't heard of very many from the police chief, so.
Since we're doing okay on time, may I ask a question related to that?
Yeah.
So I got to say, as I've been on the council now, going into my 8th year, I've always reflected that these liquor licenses seem to be rather perfunctory. I don't really dig into them to much extent. And I've always wondered if we would be better served by having a separate liquor commission board. And I might ask, if you recall, did Ted, when he was on that liquor board, or do you know of other communities, do those boards actually walk the properties and just sort of like get a feel for the environment? Because I mean, in a way, we're signing off on them serving a substance that affects decision making. Was there any aspect where they would actually do site visits to just ensure that it's an establishment we want to be purveying of alcoholic beverages?
You know, I don't recall. I do believe that they received information from the police department concerning certain establishments that had a lot of issues. And then sometimes the conversation, probably Sue knows more about this than I, sometimes the conversations were, do we really want to grant a new license, you know, in an establishment next door or across the street, or how many is enough in a particular neighborhood? I don't think that's an issue for South Burlington particularly. I would hope that Chief Burke would let us know if there were hotspots that we needed to think about.
So if
I'd
I could
agree.
just talk about that for a minute. So I think you're absolutely right. It becomes kind of perfunctory for councils. What I will say is every single liquor license that comes to you is reviewed by the health officer and the police chief. And I believe planning and zoning and fire, just to make sure they're in compliance with everything, and we haven't seen an uptick of calls. If there ever is one that one of those professionals is concerned about, we will elevate that to you before you vote on it. In my experience, and also Department of Liquor Control does do site visits. So anyone who has one of these liquor permits is also getting a similar permit from the state, and they do site visits. What I will say in my experience is while it can be seen as very perfunctory by councils, the power really comes in when something goes wrong. So you grant a license, something goes wrong, somebody's abusing that privilege, and then you still hold the power for us to come back to you and say, we need to rescind this permit. So while it feels perfunctory in their approval, in my experience, it holds a lot of power when something goes wrong, and we can come to you as the policymakers and have you course correct for us.
Matt?
I just want to say it also provides an open forum for anyone in the public to comment and say the situation at this establishment is not right, and we can listen to that and know that hopefully that can be adjudicated. So.
And
Well, I don't think we've
happened in the
ever had
past.
anyone from the public, but I agree with you. This is an opportunity.
Yeah, and it has
don't-
happened in the past.
Has it?
Oh, yeah.
People that have come forward? I
Yeah,
don't recall that.
yeah, with regard to outdoor consumption.
Oh, that's right, for
Yes.
noise and things,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
And
That's true.
don't forget the Liquor Commission, right? It processes its own complaints and does its own investigations and can revoke the state license, you know, for a suspension or
Oh, yeah.
at a drop of a hat. And I can think of several establishments in Burlington that have had that issue for various reasons: underage drinking, drinking by the staff, you know, after closure, lots of things like that. So, you know, it's pretty tightly regulated, I think.
Okay, so,
But
yes,
to be clear on that point, I'm not saying we shouldn't have a liquor control board. What I was asking is, would we be better served with a separate designated body? I think councilors do a ton of work. We all have too much work, and so part of that is to, you know, as a self-preservation technique, one less set of things for us to look at is where my mind was going to. But I'm not advocating for a
This-
separate liquor board.
This is not too much work for me, but.
yeah, I don't think this, if we started having a lot of issues and had to revoke licenses, that might be. But we seem not to, and I trust our trusty chief of police will keep us informed. Okay, so do I have a motion to approve the various liquor licenses before us tonight?
So moved.
Second,
Okay, is there any further discussion?
Yes. May these businesses be blessed with lots of customers and lots of help so that it fills up our rooms and meals taxes. Thank you very much.
Amen.
Amen, brother. Okay. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, so that's 5-0. And a motion to come out of the liquor control
so
board?
moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Great, thank you. Item 12, reports from councilors on committee assignments. So we have quite a few. Who would like to start? Anybody? Yeah.
The number 6, I've received complaints about the number 6 line. That's the one that gets you through Shelburne, all the way to Shelburne Road into Burlington. And if you work in Burlington and live somewhere in South Burlington and Shelburne, it's really important to you. And that's one of the cutbacks that went into effect in March and will remain in effect until June. This is Green Mountain Transit Authority. There's other cutbacks as well that are significant. We'll look at it in May and determine whether or not that is restored in June, but that's the situation until June.
Why would you restore it after all the students and professors don't have to go to campus? Because I hear it on my listserv. A lot of
bet.
people are upset because they can't get to campus and they have to find alternative means of transportation. And in June, they will not be coming to campus. So I'm not sure that that timeline makes sense.
Well, the timeline was forced on itself because of the lack of bus drivers. We hope to restore service completely. June was determined to be the most likely time where we could think about restoring service. But the challenge that John and the other everyone that does a great job for GMT has is if you don't have enough bus drivers to cover when someone's sick or out or has a doctor's appointment or has COVID or whatever the reason is, and you leave people stranded without a ride at all, in many ways it's worse than reduction in services. At least that's the working theory. And I came around to thinking that that was true, that rather than have people say, this bus never comes, it's not coming on time, to cut back services to what you can ensure are timely trips. And that's the challenge in the direction that the GMT went.
Is there any hope of state dollars, federal dollars to?
There is, but without expressing an opinion one way or the other, especially in front of a member of the Senate Transportation Committee. But
That's true.
But the transportation bill has this money plus a federal match to extend zero fund fares. But we have to prepare as if it's not going to arrive, because you can never assume, as you know, that things will happen, even if they're likely to occur, you can't assume they are. So we have to prepare for zero fund fares, zero fares to end, while we're also expecting this money to come. So from a communications standpoint, I really feel for the people who are both communicating these service reductions plus the end of zero fund fares, although it may come back in the form of a transportation bill. In the end, I mean, I don't know what I'm learning. I'll be quite honest with you. I don't know it all, but in many ways, I would rather have a full service, right? So you didn't have those people complaining about why can't I get to school on time, or why do I have to get to school really early?
School at all.
Yes, or school at all. I would rather have more service with fares rather than having the fares be reduced, but fares be zero, but service be reduced. You know what I'm saying? And I don't know how it all gets. Yeah, but we need drivers.
Is there a line from Montpelier that was reduced?
Yes, the Montpelier link.
I think that's also some professors who can't get here from Montpelier. Yeah, it's really affected a lot of people. Yeah.
Is there an alternative, like ride sharing? The state has Go Vermont, right, which is a ride sharing app for the phones. Does that includes car sharing, right, and carpooling? So does GMT, are they advertising that, hey, during this flux time when we don't have enough drivers, here are some alternatives you could try to organize yourself, so if you people that live down Shelburne Road that need to get to UVM, they could, get together and with somebody who does have a car and self-organize?
I mean, in many ways, it's the competition, right? But
yeah,
those devices do exist, and maybe you have friends or family in more urban areas where they have those apps that they utilize that you can pick up essentially a hitchhiker,
right.
And they work.
Yeah,
they really do work.
Yeah.
GMT hasn't promoted those or sought those, but
right.
Well, that seems like something the state might want to do, just in terms of cutting down emissions.
Yeah, and really, in many ways, these microtransit is such an interesting concept. If you have a diesel bus with someone that seats 12, with a commercial driver, because they have to have a commercial driver's office license, but there's only 2 people in the bus, microtransit doesn't exactly achieve what you want. You're better off paying for an Uber and a Prius from a emission standpoint than you are a diesel bus that seats 12.
No, but I was thinking of, so the professors who live in Shelburne.
Or Montpelier.
Or Montpelier might have a colleague with whom they could carpool. I mean, when I was in the legislature, I always carpooled. We usually had about 4 people in the car.
Yeah.
But you have a similar schedule, whereas professors, we have all kinds of different schedules, and we have meetings, and we do different kinds of work, where some people go.
Well, I know, and sometimes you have to adjust your work to fit that, so that you know, I mean, I know you can't always make every meeting, or it's a pain in the neck because you want to just stay late for a hearing or something and you don't have a ride home, so you have to carpool. But it's just an option that can work. But anyway, okay. Any other reports? Okay. Yes.
For the airport rezoning task
Oh,
force.
yeah.
We met last Thursday, and we looked at 3 options that our consultant, Brandy Saxton, had put together for us to consider as a response to the airport's request to change the zoning of roughly 11 acres of land in the Chamberlain neighborhood from residential to airport. And the first one was to defer is the word, to defer that decision until the comprehensive plan could take into account all of the noise lands, and that would come before us in 2023 with passage in 2024. So to defer until the Planning Commission had time to think through how all of the noise land should be used. The second option was to deny because of lack of compatibility with the neighborhood. And the third option was to allow for buildings at a certain setback with tree plantings and green roofs. And again, this would be part of the 2024 comprehensive plan update, where they would again consider the noise lands. After discussion, there were 5 of us that were present. 1 person was missing. All 5 were unanimously opposed to allowing the request to go through. 1 of the members was in favor of deferring, and the 4 other members denied. So the next steps is to hear from the public again through a public meeting on April 7th, and then possibly on April 21st, the task force will actually lay out the reasons for the denial. And I can just give you a synopsis, and I might not capture them all. But the synopsis includes the concern that the comprehensive plan identifies that part of the airport as something that should be compatible with a residential neighborhood, whereas what we call the valley, which is on the southeastern side of the airport, is where industrial uses should be located. And the airport's request is, in effect, moving industrial uses towards the neighborhood side of the airport. Something that I brought into the meeting, because I have been meeting with a lot of people at the airport, is that there is, in fact, enough land in the general aviation area, which is called the Valley on the southeastern side of the airport, with some planning. In fact, all of the needs that the airport director expressed when making his request could be met. And it just requires more coordination. And there's also the concern on the part of neighbors that once some of these acres are allowed to be rezoned, that anything could happen on those acres. Even if now people are saying that the uses would be fairly innocuous and not noisy. That could change without having any local control over that. And I would say, majority of residents, and it's also a sentiment on the part of some task force members, I would say the majority of task force members, is a lack of trust in the airport. That there has not been enough of a display of giving to the neighborhood. If they truly would like to have their request considered, that there should be more offered to the neighborhood in exchange. So I'm sure there are other things that we could add to that list, and we're going to be working on that again towards the end of April. And then passing along that conclusion to the Planning Commission, and they will take it from there, and then we will take it from there.
Okay, the Climate Change Task Force keeps meeting. I got thrown off. I was in Utah and I was trying to join it in, and my son-in-law didn't realize I was on a conference call, and he started moving stuff around in the house. So all of a sudden, so I didn't hear the whole meeting, but they are really moving ahead with really following along on the state action plan, and have gotten through most, if not all, of the kind of building construction concepts, and we'll be moving on to transportation, so that eventually, soon, I think there'll be a list of recommendations for the community, for South Burlington, for us to really look at. And as always, I'm just impressed with the caliber of individuals on that team, and how many articles they send, and they're really connected, well connected. This is a passion that they all seem to have. They're not just kind of like, yeah, I'm sort of interested and I'll sit in. So it's a very impressive team. Are there any other committee reports, pension? They're all set. All right, is there any other business?
I do have something.
Okay.
So nothing for debate or discussion or action because it's not warned, but Helen and Jesse are aware of this, and this is wearing my state senate cap, but we are not this week, but next week going to be hearing from Deputy Mayor Duncan from Winooski. I'm hoping.
Yes, I already signed up.
Chair Reilly, Mayor Weinberger, Charlie Baker, and others on a bill that Maida Townsend has introduced in 2 sessions now, H52, which takes action on what was called for in June 2013 by the Burlington International Airport Strategic Planning Committee to work with the state and other potential regional partners to explore a regional authority model to be implemented as financial goals are realized. Direct quote from their recommendations. This is a bill that Maida Townsend has introduced a few times. The Senate Transportation Committee seems supportive of adding it to the T-bill. We've right now we're allocating about $50,000 of planning money for consultancy. I did ask Helen Reilly thank you, Chair Reilly, for responding back already with some thoughts on how the bill could be better. So I hope that you will be finding time coming in, and I don't know if Jesse would offer any thoughts on how to also make it. So I don't think we need an official position as a council, but I encourage you, if you have time, to look at H52. It's just a study group with a composition of members from Winooski, Burlington, the CCRPC, and others. And Maida Townsend has been advocating for this for some time. So I'm optimistic. I'm hoping that Chair Reilly will be supportive of it, but it seems like the Transportation Committee is very ready. I don't want to speak for them, but I have no reason to believe that there's an objection to this, and I'm hopeful that this will happen over the next year.
Great, thank you. No, I think it makes a lot of sense. So I'll be happy to share my wisdom, such as it is. Any other business? Yes.
I feel like maybe I said this in City Updates last week and I am forgetting it. I just wanted to make sure all knew that Congressman Welch got us $750,000 through the federal omnibus bill for regional dispatch, which is a huge win. So just wanted to make sure that was still out there. Thanks.
Yep.
And it was on the work plan.
That was on your update.
Oh, it was on
That
the
was
work
one of
plan.
those things that,
Red.
yeah, it said, we'll work
Kind
to
of like I
coordinate
wrote that.
or, collaborate, and then it said 750,000, so
Sorry, guys.
Yes, that is, okay. All right, so item 14, which will end our session, we will not come back into session following the executive session if we agree to move into that. So Tim?
Sure. I move that the council make a specific finding that premature general public knowledge of the Burton Corporation Higher Ground Environmental Court appeal and other civil litigation to which the city is a party and confidential attorney-client communications made for the purpose of providing professional legal services to the council would clearly place the city at a substantial disadvantage.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye. And I now move that the board enter into executive session for the purpose of discussing Burton Corporation, Higher Ground Environmental Court appeal, and other civil litigation to which the city is a party, and receiving confidential attorney-client communications made for the purpose of providing professional legal services to the council, inviting in Jesse Baker, Andrew Bolduc, and Colin McNeil into session with the council. And there is Mr. McNeil over there.
And I will second that.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so we will move in and we will not come back, so. Thank you, public, for joining our meeting tonight.
Jordan, are you?